Okay, welcome. We are now going to start working on dihybrid genetic crossing. So you should feel comfortable with the monohybrid. Di means two, so we're going to be looking at and focusing on two traits. Everything will be the same, symbols, parents, Punnett squares, answering questions, but we need to add a new step in there, and it's the formation of gametes. So let's go ahead and start with the symbols. So you should have the worksheet that says dihybrid genetic crossings. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to read through my problems. Heterozygous tall, heterozygous brown seed coat, crossed, homozygous recessive short, homozygous recessive white. And the two traits, height and color. So let's go ahead, and our height, we have tall, and the contrasting is short. Tells me to use T. So here it says heterozygous tall, so it could be tall as the dominant, but let's just make sure. Recessive short, so let's make tall a capital T and recessive short a lowercase t. For color, I have brown and I have white. So those are my two traits, and you notice I have the letter T for the height, the letter B for the color. Keep those straight, and of course then a capital and lowercase letter for dominant and recessive. So brown is dominant, capital B, and white is recessive, lowercase b. So there's my symbols. Now let's do the parents. So we're going to be consistent. Let's do the height as my first trait, and I'll write my color for my second trait. So heterozygous tall, so that tells me big T, little t. Heterozygous brown, big B, little b. Okay, I know before we wanted to put the dominant letter first, so don't be tempted to do big T, big B, little t, little b. Keep the letters together. Okay, we will reform these when we make gametes after we practice writing parents. Okay, so crossed with homozygous recessive short. So the only way it can be short, remember, is two lowercase letters. Homozygous recessive white, and the same thing goes for white. Okay, so that's all I really needed to do for number one. So let's go to number two. So here I've got a purebred dominant round, purebred recessive brown. So I've got round and brown, and pure means homozygous. So, and then I've got round again, and I have black. Well, I don't know what my contrasting trait is for the shape, because I'm going to use R for shape and B for brown. So I'm going to put round, but I don't know what the other is. So if I don't know it's wrinkled, which usually round and wrinkled are contrasting, I could just put other. But I know from doing problems that my recessive trait is going to be wrinkled. But again, if you don't know, just put other, and that's perfectly fine. So round is dominant, so I'm going to use capital R, and my other or wrinkled is recessive, lowercase r. Now I've got, okay, now this is, you got to be careful. Remember I said I could switch these around. So you would think that brown would be capital letter, but if I read carefully, recessive brown, dominant black. So I've got black, and if you switch these around on writing them, that's fine. And I've got brown is my color. So black would be a capital B, and brown would be a lowercase b. Now my parents. So I've got purebred dominant round. So two capital R's. Remember, we're going to put the first trait and then the second trait behind it. Purebred recessive brown. So two little b's. Okay. Then I have heterozygous round, so big R, little r. Purebred dominant black, two big B's. So just read it carefully, and I would, if I were you, to go back and just double check the parents, because like I said, when we're doing monohybrid crosses, if you write the parents down wrong, form the gametes, make the square, anything you answer, if you're off one letter, will affect your answer. Okay, number three. So here I've got homozygous dominant yellow pod, homozygous recessive brown, heterozygous yellow, heterozygous black. So I've got my two traits, pod and color of the coat. So let's do yellow And then like before, I don't know what the other color is. It could be green, but I'm just not really sure. So let's just go ahead and put other. So it tells me to use D's. So I'm going to use a capital D because yellow is dominant, and a lowercase d for my other color, which could be green. And then I have black, and I'm going to put C behind it so we can keep those colors straight. And then I've got brown. And that would be seed also. So capital B, lowercase b. Now let's write our parents. Homozygous dominant yellow, so 2 big D's. Homozygous recessive brown, 2 little b's. My second parent, heterozygous yellow, so big D, little d. Heterozygous black seed coat, so big B, little b. Okay, so hopefully you feel comfortable now writing the symbols and the parents. Now let's move on to the next and new step that's different between monohybrid and dihybrid. Now this part is not on your worksheet, so if you want to pause this, if you want to copy this part down, you should start with number 4. Okay, when you make gametes, think of when you were using algebra and you would use the FOIL method. We're going to use the same thing here. So we're going to take the first and the third letter, you could say it that way. So it would be A and C. Those would combine to make a gamete. And then A and D, that would make a gamete. Then I would take the B and the C, that's a gamete, and B and D is a gamete. Okay, so if you just follow that sequence each time to form gametes, you'll be just fine. And here we're ignoring writing the dominant letter first. We're ignoring that. So be consistent. If I put D's first, I want to have a D first in all of these for both parents, or if I put G first. Okay, I usually just start whatever's left. Okay, so I'm going to go first, third. So I've got big D, little g, and then I'm going to go first and last, big D, little g, second, third, little d, little g, second and last, little d, little g. Now this one, they're all the same. As you can see, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 2, 3, 2, 4. So these are all the same. Okay, so the steps, symbols, parents, and now the gametes. So you have to do the gametes before you make the Punnett square. So don't forget that step. Okay, so let's go to number 5, following the same method. First, third, so I got big B, big F. Then I've got big B, go with the last, little f. Little b, big F. Now you notice I did not write the capital letter first. I'm listing all my B's first. It'll make your life easier when you recombine these to make the offspring, trust me. Little b, little f. And then these, just like before, are all going to be the same. Whoops, a little off there. That's okay. Okay, number 6. Lots of practice. So we got big A, little b, big A, little b. Now we got little a, little b, little a, little b. This one, A, big B, little a, little b, little a, big B, and little a, little b. Okay, so hopefully you feel comfortable now doing gametes. So that's the third step. So now let's go to our Punnett square. Now this is not on your worksheet. I'm going to go ahead and also talk about geno and phenotypic, kind of like what we did before. Okay, so here are my symbols. Here are my parents. I've already created the gametes following what we did the last 3, 4 through 6. Now, you're going to take each circle, and this is just how my professor did it. He said each circle was a gamete, which think of it egg, sperm, or vice versa. So each one, that's why there's 4 of them. Okay, if you imagine it that way. Now, when you have more traits, obviously you'll have more gametes, but each one is a gamete. you're going to take each circle and write it exactly the way it is, one in each of these parent boxes. And so you notice I've color coded it, okay? And then these are all the same down the side. Now, when I fill in my offspring, I'm going to put the letters back together. Now I go back to dominant letter first for each trait. So I'm going to put my A's together. So I've got big A, big B, little b. Okay? My next one, go down and across, big A, two little b's. Then I've got big A, big B, little b. Then I've got big A, little b, little b. Okay? Okay, so we'll continue. We'll go to the next row. Now you'll notice all of these are the same. So if I continue this down, I will have big A, big B, little b. And I'll continue that pattern down. So I'm fine as long as you remember that you still need to count each of these. You can draw a line down to save writing all of that. And so I can see here that this is big A, little b, little b. That'll be the same, so I can go ahead and draw an arrow. And then this will be the same, since all of these are the same, so I can draw an arrow down. And I can do the same thing for this. And that's fine. You could have it go across this way too, okay, especially if you switched your parents. Okay, so let's go to the genotype. The geno, remember, are all the letters, the combination that's in each of these squares. Now before monohybrid cross, we had 4 offspring, the outcome. Now we've got 16. Okay, so whatever I have over here as a ratio or my numbers needs to equal 16. That way you make sure you don't forget one. So let's write our combination. So I've got big A, big B, little b. So I will go through and count how many I have with that combination. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's 5, 6, 7, 8. You notice how I kind of mark those off? Makes it a little bit easier if you're counting. So that's 8. Now let me go to my next genotype. So big A, and 2 little b's. And I've got 4 here, and I have 4 there. So I've got 8. So my ratio, if I ask for a ratio, is 8 to 8. That equals 16. Equals the number of offspring. Okay, phenotype is the physical appearance. What do they look like? So I need to go back to my symbols. So here, let me quickly change pen color so it's a little bit easier to read. Okay, so I'm going to look at the first letter of each trait. Okay, so that's why I had to recombine. Okay, so I'm going to treat these separately. So these are 2 traits. So my big A is round. So let me write round. And the second trait of this offspring, capital B, is tall. So I will go through and see how many have a big A and a big B as the first letter. So these are all, that would be 4, and that combination, that's 4. So this one just happens to be 8 too. My next, I've got a capital A, so that's round. And now I have a little b, which is short. And so with that combination, I've got 4 and 4. So I've got 8. So just so happens that the ratios are the same. Okay? So it's why it's very important that you have those gametes set up correctly. Okay, so that takes care of our intro. So if you need to go back and look at it, there are some additional YouTube videos on dihybrid crosses. I've got several of those. Feel free to go through and take a look at those. Okay, so we'll tackle the next worksheet a little bit later. Bye-bye.